Having ended the first match day in suitably confident fashion, talking about goal difference, it's safe to say the Rovercoaster is now no longer as enjoyable as we might have hoped after a second defeat in a week yesterday evening. Having lost unexpectedly last Tuesday to East Kilbride, it was always going to take something special for Barry Robson's side to reach the last 16 of the League Cup. Unfortunately, that has not happened with a 3-1 defeat yesterday evening at McDermott Park, ensuring that the Rovers are exiting for the second campaign in a row at the group stages. This is the Oh No 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 podcast. My name is Robbie Weir. I'm your host this evening, and I'm delighted to be joined by, firstly, Duncan Cameron. How are you getting on, Duncan?
I'm doing well, mate. Yeah, doing well, thank you. Managed to park so far away from McDermott Park last night, I think I'd have been quicker walking for the house. But other than that, yeah, not too bad at all, thank you.
Just getting your Strava updates as you gradually march through the kilometres. Also got a returning Ali Pilmer. How are you getting on, Ali?
I am fine. I'm a bit annoyed to be at the League Cup so soon, but I've already bought my ticket for Saturday, so I'll just have to lump it.
The commitment to the cause at all costs, unfortunately. And then, of course, Scott. How are you getting on, Scott Fleming?
Yeah, I'm doing all right. Unlike Duncan, we were only about 2 minutes away to get away in the car, so luckily we were able to get out of Perth pretty quickly last night. But it was another frustrating evening at certain points, but I'm sure we'll talk plenty about that tonight.
Yeah, so we'll start off with the pre-match. So the lineup was pretty much unchanged. There wasn't any radical movement from Barry Robson and his team selection. Only really the two doubts had been Lewis Stevenson, who came in to replace Josh Mullen, and then of course Dylan Easton started the game despite picking up a knock against East Kilbride in his back. Just to start with yourself, Duncan, do you think that was a pretty bold move by Barry Robson given the circumstances? Two players that maybe not near full fitness in the grand scheme of things?
Yeah, I think so. I understand. I mean, Barry Robson said this himself before the game when I think it must have been the Courier, because it was actual quotes from someone who spoke to him, so it definitely wasn't the Fife Free Press. He was saying that, it's a chance to potentially change things up, but we weren't out of it yet, so you want to play your strongest side. So to an extent, I understand that he has this very dogmatic side that he wants to play, but I wouldn't have started Dylan Easton last night. If you get any kind of issue, especially something like a back complaint where you think a bit of rest's what that needs, and the fact that Jack Hamilton needs minutes, I think that just would have made sense anyway. And is that, now listen, we're all huge fans of Dylan Easton, but I don't think it's not really weakening your side massively. Being forced, quote unquote, to start your big number 9. That's not a bad place to be. That shouldn't be the kind of thing that you're shying away from. So that was the main one. I wasn't particularly surprised otherwise. There's been a lot of chat around Sean Byrne in particular. I imagine we'll devote a fair chunk of this conversation this evening to talking about that at some stage. But no, I see that would have been the one for me, would have been just to... It would have taken a big result for us to go through, and I don't think starting Jack Hamilton really would have made that any less likely. So that's the change I would have made.
And for yourself, Ali, is there any sort of frustration that we've kept the same? Where do you sort of stand on that? Barry Robson's obviously, I feel like he's tinkered it slightly as to be a bit more aggressive with his sort of formation. Similar system to what we were playing at the tail end of last season, but maybe a bit more in terms of two sort of wider forwards, I would say, up top, rather than just two central strikers. What are your sort of opinions on that? Do you think that sacrificing sort of the stability in the middle, do you think that's a big call from him to go for that for the second game in a row after the sort of collapse against East Kilbride?
Um, in general, I was fairly nonplussed when I saw the starting lineup, but I think it's just because I sort of expect Barry Robson not to change much, and I kind of agree with the general point that you've got a couple of faces in the door, McMullen and Rowe. You're probably wanting to start roughly the same 11 that you would be looking to play in the league game, try and get minutes into their legs, try and sort of get them used to each other. But I definitely think there are deficiencies in it. I mean, I'm firmly in the camp that Sean Burns should be starting after Brown and Matthews' recent performances, and I think I wasn't too fussed beforehand, but by the end of it, I think I will definitely be advocating changes. I think there were deficiencies in the system that were plain to see.
I think that camp is now the biggest camping site in Perth since Tea in the Park at Balado. It's just continuing to grow. The game started in a sort of... the Rovers obviously started quite an aggressive fashion. I mean, Scott Brown goes into the book early doors. For yourself, Scott, what did you make of that? Is it a bit of a worry to see sort of the referee set the tone early, particularly given we know what Scott Brown's like in terms of his game style? Again, against East Kilbride, maybe not had the best game. So is that a bit frustrating to see from your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's not a league game or anything like that, and even in league games, I hate to see, even unless it's like a proper blatant foul that's like going to stop somebody for on the break, one-on-one, or like whatever, something like that. So early on, I find it really annoying to see somebody go in the book either side, if it's our player or the other player, because I'm just like, well, it's a foul, move on. Like, I didn't get why there's this clamour for booking so early in games. Obviously, as I say, if it's like a ridiculous challenge and he's half them down, then fair enough. But I don't even think that Bruni's one last night was even like, it was a foul. Right, move on. It wasn't a booking or anything like that. So I thought it was a bit harsh. But then, as you say, like Bruni then has to watch himself for 85 minutes because he's probably going to know that he's going to play the full game. So it then means that Ross Matthews has got to be the one that, I mean, he doesn't need to be asked twice to go into a challenge, but like it's then him that's got to be the one that's kind of more of the enforcer, because it means that Bruni can't do anything in terms of being too... There was at least twice I seen in the first half anyway. I didn't notice it so much in the second half, but there was twice before half-time where Bruni's gone in, or looked to go in for a challenge, and it was almost a 50-50, and he's almost went, actually, I'm just going to let him have the ball, because he knows that the referee's already booked him, so he's already in his head, knowing that this guy's on a booking. And I think even guys like Holt and McAleer knew this, because there was one challenge, I can't remember if it was Matthews or Brown, but they went into the challenge, and McAleer's flung himself up in the air. It's like he's jumped over a pommel horse at the Olympics or something, and flung himself down, and then started. But then the St Johnstone players are pointing as if it's a straight leg, and we're like, he's won the ball, and it wasn't even a straight leg. Like, so often St Johnstone last night, it was one thing that was really frustrating was how much rolling about they were doing after they were tackled, and it was just like, this referee's got no chance if he's constantly having to look around and seeing somebody look like they've been shot on the ground. Like, that was one thing for me anyway. But in terms of the whole point, I do think that for Bruni, it must have been frustrating to go into the book straight away. And as I say, I just think so early it's not needed.
Yeah, it really creates a rod for the referee's back, because automatically you've got a call that they're going to get judged by. And then very quickly after Duncan, Brown and Matthews actually link up really well to win the ball. They find Paul McMullen, who fires it round the corner for Dylan Easton, who is then... how shall we describe Morgan Boys' challenge? I'll leave that one up to you. What did you make of the penalty shout?
Let me get my to be fair to him bit out of the way first. I do think it's only the reverse angle that clears this up. However, when you see that reverse angle, it is crystal clear. There's absolutely no doubt about it whatsoever. That's a penalty kick. Boys is late. It's probably the most charitable you could give to that. You know, he's not coming in from a great angle either. The saving grace for Morgan boys is that Easton knocks the ball away in the the sort of opposite direction that Boys is coming in from, if that makes sense. So, if Boys had gotten to the ball, that's the direction it would have gone in. And I can only assume that's what the referee thinks he's seen. But as I say, when you see it from the reverse angle, it's crystal clear. There's a good half second there. There's clean air. The ball's away before Boys then clears Easton out. Again, as I say, if the referee's blindsided, there's not so much you can do about it. It is categorically a wrong decision. There's no point getting totally bent out of shape about it. I'm not even sure it's one where you should be saying that the linesman can help him out, because again, he's kind of on the blind side of it as well. Right, cowardly bunch as a species linesman. Anyway, not going to insert himself on that. But again, I'm feeling clearly quite kind tonight. What I will say, just to maybe expand this conversation around a little bit, that whole move, I think, is Barry Robson in a nutshell. That's his football working, in the sense that it starts with St Johnstone in possession. They don't necessarily do anything wrong. There's not an East Kilbride style giving us the ball. There's a very slight loose touch, and straight away Matthews snaps into it. Brown is right there to take the ball, plays it through. As you say, it's turned round the corner and we're in on goal. That's how we play football now. That's Barry Robson's whole thing, and that's the way that he wants to be. He wants that midfield too, just buzzing around, crashing into people. And that's where it works. And we're very, very unfortunate not to get the penalty kick, or even, get a shot away if he's not fouled there. So I just want people to bear in mind that I've said that that's when it works, and that's what it looks like when it works, when I'm saying lots of other things at various other points here, because it's not a magic bullet. I don't think it's a style of football that works all the time. I don't think it's a style of football that works against everyone either. And this is where I think we might run into a bit of an issue, is, first of all, playing against slightly better teams in the division that we're in, but also it's very predictable. There's no question of which Rover side are we going to get this week. It's going to be that one. And as I say, that's where it worked. Yeah. And you see that in a couple of the other chances that we get as well. It's the same idea. That's the plan, is you win the ball back, and before the opposition can think, you're on them. And there are absolutely teams that will work against as well. We saw it in the back half of last season. If you are coming up against a side where they're not particularly packing their midfield, so straight away you're onto their defence, that'll work really well. If you're playing a side whose centre halves aren't particularly mobile, more on that later, that'll work as well. But where I think we ran into bother with St Johnstone last night was that they're quite happy to play football. Their whole midfield and their defence are all fairly comfortable, and their defence are very mobile as well, which means that it's much trickier to get that to work time and time again, which is kind of what we need, because as we saw against East Kilbride, we're not particularly clinical. We're kind of a numbers team, and if we can only turn that over and snatch one or two chances a game, we're kind of putting ourselves up against it a little bit.
Yeah, I totally agree, and it's interesting for me to look at the whole discourse about Barry Robson and where we're at as a club and what we're doing and the direction that we're heading. Naturally, I'm not saying we're by any means the finished article. We've obviously got players still to bring in, and how many we can actually bring in is in itself a question. But this discussion about a lot of it's about it almost feels like we're trying to tear down a system. Whereas I feel like rather than taking a sledgehammer to it, we just kind of need to remove the wallpaper a little bit and tidy up a few things. there's been a lot of very big questions getting asked, but I think it's almost sort of slightly smaller questions that maybe need asked, smaller tweaks that maybe need made in terms of how the system is. Ali, Saints do go 1-0 up, of course. Shortly after that, Paul McMullen loses the ball to new St Johnstone signing Rhys McAleer, who's came in from Livingston. Very basic, but very effective in the sense that, without doing a disservice to them, a really, really good ball by McAleer. It's a ball over the top. And Jamie Gullen holds off Paul Hanlon and beats Josh Ray. What were your thoughts on the goal? Whereabout would you attribute the sort of blame if you were to sort of pinpoint the sort of root cause of that one?
I go back to the fact that McAleer found himself out wide in plenty space. I said to Scott at one point, we were sitting next to each other, and I said to him during the first half that McAleer was popping up, dropping deep in space, on the right, on the left, coming through the middle, and nobody was picking him up. Nobody at all. And he drifted out left in space, got the ball, it's a great ball in, and Gullen just steals a march, really. And it's funny because when I was watching the replay, Gullen's touch is like not the best, but also it's the perfect touch because it carries it further away from Hanlon, who's trying to close the space, and then he puts it past Ray. So I think we give them far too much time and space, both McAleer to get the pass away, and it's not the first time in pre-season and in the League Cup games that strikers have stolen a march in our centre-backs. They're far too static. I thought at the time that Josh Ray should have done better, and I was kind of shouting it in the stands. In hindsight, I think maybe the power just beats him.
I think, sorry to just jump in very briefly on that, I think both the touch and the fault of the goalkeeper are both part of the same thing, which is Gullen taking it so early on his left. Because if he wants to try and take a touch after his first touch, then it's terrible. But because he hits it first time, it turns into a great touch. He's killed the ball and then he hits it, and I think Ray's caught out by that as well. I'm less inclined to blame the goalkeeper for that one because how close it is and it's hit with the power. But at the same time, I can understand why people are asking that question.
And Scott, was there any... Obviously, it's always going to be frustrating to lose a goal, but for you, what were you making of it?
Yeah, for me, I was not on board with the whole it was Josh Ray's fault. I know that there was a lot of people last night at least put two of the goals on him in terms of blame-wise, but obviously we'll talk about that later as well. But I think for me, I think it actually is a nice finish for Jamie Gullen because like McAleer's put in a pretty half-decent ball and he's obviously taken it down, and on his weaker foot he's managed to hit it first time and put it on target, and that's all you ask your striker to do in that position. Put it on target and you never know, it could go in. I mean, how many times have we seen somebody like Lewis Vaughan pop up in the box, one touch and just hit it and it goes on target, and either the keeper's had to make a really good save or it's in the back of the net. So fair play to Gullen for that, but if there was anybody, I slightly thought that Hanlon was maybe sleeping just for like 2 seconds maximum, and that's allowed Gullen to make that sort of curved run, take the touch, and then score. Because Hanlon, I mean, Fordyce is the one that's actually... So Gullen's in between Fordyce and Hanlon for this. Fordyce can't see Gullen. It's Hanlon that can see Gullen's run. So he's the one for me that has to be kind of following Gullen in. And he just... For some reason, he's just not aware that when Gullen's going to make that moment where he is going to run, and it's just that split second or two, and that's what's caught Hanlon out. And I do think that actually, I think the whole back three in general, I thought were pretty poor last night, but I think that goal, especially that one and then the third one later on, they two just showed that we, for some reason, considering how well we had played at the end of last season, our defence just hasn't got going this season so far. Whilst we were all, I think everybody was in agreement that these three we're happy with as our back three, it's something that I'd said back in, I think, March time, that we lack so much pace at the back that if any ball over the top, and I worry pretty much because I was actually more worried about Sidibe last night than I was Gullen. But that goal and the third one just kind of, it stood out that we really need somebody at the back that's going to be a bit pacier than the three that we've got.
I think there's the consternation about it all is the fact that we've seen them do so well at the end of last season, which really annoying when you go in to the end of a season and you come so close to the playoffs, you fall short and you think, right, we're sorted for next season, and then next season begins and then we're coming up against these hurdles where we're losing these sorts of goals. Duncan, I can see you pondering away. What are you thinking?
That's exactly what I'm doing. I'm pondering. I have a lot of thoughts on this because I understand entirely what you mean about getting more pace in as a centre half. That would help in a lot of these situations. But at the same time, what I kind of think is, like, are we going to get a pacey centre half who's also as good a defender as any of those three? At this level, I'm not sure that you do. And I think, for me, it's not, or it doesn't have to be just as simple as, can we find somebody who's quick enough to do the running that whichever two are left behind aren't going to do. I think it's about countering your own weaknesses. What's the right word? Mitigating for them.
Mm-hmm.
So, thinking about the back end of last season, and I'm very much thinking about this kind of on the fly, but I wonder if we haven't actually been quite helped by the fact that Josh Mullen was playing at right wing back, and he was quite conservative.
Yeah.
You know, you think like, oh, you're sticking a winger at wing back, he's going to be all over the place. But actually, he was really disciplined. He was clearly very aware of the fact that, like, hang on, if I go and do my normal thing, I'm going to be out of position. I better kind of hold my place. If you look at these goals that we concede, our wing backs are so far forward. And now that's not to go all Roy Keane, but that's their job.
Yeah.
At least some of the time. But I think what we're not doing is then factoring that in. So if you're going to go, right, J-Row, you've got, you know, the athleticism to get up and down that side. So when we've got the ball, I want you to go and push on. That's a great weapon. That's something we want to have, something we want to do.
See, just to come in there, it's something that we've already seen the benefit of. He's got 2 goals and he got an assist last night, which we'll come on to.
100%. So. That's exactly it. As I say, that's what you want him to do. But there's kind of one of these things which, like, you know, every action has an opposite reaction kind of idea. If you're going to send your wing back flying, much more so than Josh Mullen was doing last season, you need to then think about, well, what does that mean? And what it means, like, for example, for the first goal, is Paul McMullen doesn't take a huge risk. He does the kind of thing that you want Paul McMullen to do, which is try and beat his man. Dylan Easton does it a lot. And you hear people in the South Stand in particular kind of getting on at him when it doesn't come off and he loses the ball. And you think, yeah, but that's all the good stuff that he does starts in exactly the same way, but the ball does go through the boy's legs instead of coming back off his ankle. You need to be able to have Paul McMullen take that chance. Because again, you're cutting him off at the knees if you're telling him he can't do that when he's in the middle of the park. But it's very telling on that highlight package for that first goal. Paul McMullen's on the halfway line. He's actually receiving the ball with his back to goal, and as he turns into trouble. He gets dispossessed. There's then a beat as McAleer comes away, and then J-Row comes back into shot because he's been so far advanced. He's thinking 2 phases ahead. And if Paul McMullen had beaten that man, we're in a great position to go forward. But as soon as that ball does get turned around, we are all at sea, because Doherty decides to come and try and pick up the man who's drifting into the channel, which, as the wide centre-half, he needs to do because his wing-back is gone. Gullen has dropped out of the front line, which he did a lot in that first half, and caused us no end of bother. He's in the centre circle with Paul McMullen when the ball's turned over. He's actually further away from goal than Matthews and Brown. They're both in a really good position. But Brown gets dragged across towards Rowe's side as well, because again, he knows that's where the space is. And Sidibe's kind of at that point as well. But because Doherty's gone over, Fordyce is going over as well. And what it means is there's a point when McAleer chips the ball, you can pause it in the highlights, and Jamie Gillan is just running through the middle of the park by himself. And Hanlon is trying to cover effectively the width of the park. We're playing 3 centre-halves and 2 holding midfielders to trade. I understand we're asking them both to be very kind of box-to-box, but you can't be leaving that much space in the middle. But it's because we're trying to do it on the fly. There doesn't seem to be, anyway, to the untrained eye, a plan for that. A plan for Dylan Easton, Paul McMillan. They're going to be taking chances in the middle. To take advantage of that when it works, we want the wing-backs going right on. What do we do if it doesn't work? Who's going where? Because it seems that we basically and it's actually, I think, more apparent in the second goal, everybody just kind of goes, who's my nearest man? I'm just going to try and cover him. And McAleer, I think, actually deserves a lot of credit because it's a lovely little ball over the top. And I think a few of his other options have been closed off. He doesn't really have a short, simple pass. He's only got that ball over the top. But that's where the concern comes for me, given that we had 3 friendlies, I think. We had 3 friendlies. We had 2 games against lower league opposition. This is the first real kind of test. And we're doing stuff that I would have expected to see 4 games ago. Stuff that we kind of saw in that Linlithgow game once all the subs had been made, and you were like, this is fine. But if you're Barry Robson, if you're going to play the same team every single game, which he is, you need to have that basics of organisation knocked down. That should be almost like item number 1. Well, at least everybody knows their jobs and everybody knows where they need to be. And that's what I think that wasn't really in evidence last night.
The frustration, just to finish on it a little bit, is the frustration for me is the fact that the reason you play a back 3, well, one of the reasons you play a back 3 is so you've got that extra centre half, whether it's to counter a front 2 or whether it's to whatever your reason is, you've got an extra player there normally. So how we managed to go from an extra player to then nobody on somebody or 1-on-1. Somebody's not done their job right there. Whether it is, as Duncan says, the wing-back being caught out of position, or somebody's then had to fill in, or somebody's thought they've had to go and fill in and actually moved out of the position they need to stay in. These are all things that, Barry Robson will be picking up on himself, but that the players themselves need to be watching back, because I thought it was actually Fordyce's worst game, probably since we were all kind of slating him when he came back into the team. Like, by a mile, he was caught out every time for pace. He looked slow and sluggish the whole game. And I don't know for what reason, but it just seemed like it actually looked like a guy that had played 3 games in a week. And we'd had a full week to prepare for that game. So it was a wee bit frustrating to see that. It was also Paul Hanlon's poorest game for a while. I don't think Doherty was too bad. Again, at times when he was on the ball, I thought he was trying almost too much to try and create things in terms of starting for the back. I'd rather he just kept it a bit more simple, considering we weren't getting. I mean, St Johnstone were having plenty of the ball, but they weren't creating loads of chances in that first half. So it would for me, it would have been better if we had just kept everything as simple as possible, and then try to, once we'd settled into the game a bit more, then try to be a bit more adventurous. But for me, I just think that we need to be getting this teed down, because at the end of the day, we were fine last season with this back 3, and I get that we've got a slightly more attacking fullback now than what we had in Jordan Doherty or in Josh Mullen. But yeah, I think that we need to know how we're allowing teams to be able to come at us when we are meant to have that extra defender.
Yeah. It's probably one of the ironic things about Barry Robson and the way that his tenure's gone is the area that he has probably been the most cutthroat in with dropping players is actually centre-halves, because we saw, firstly, Ewan Murray drop out the team in the second half of last season, and also we had Liam Dick come in for a short spell, and then he got cut out when we switched it up to go with Fordyce, Hanlon and Doherty. He's not got that option at the moment, simply with the numbers that we've got. I know that we'd spoken a lot about Darragh O'Connor in terms of whether he's seemingly going to sign and what's happening with that. Nobody really knows at the moment. It's all really seems to be speculation. But he doesn't have that option to be able to switch it up, which is a key problem, I think, going into the sort of games like this at the moment, because really it's missing Liam Dick in particular. I think that sort of a game like last night, you can bring in Liam Dick and it just changes the dynamic as to who's in there. If you've maybe had a player that's had a bit of an off night, then you can sort of mitigate that. But whether that gets addressed in the short term, we'll only find out, I guess,
You
very
can
soon.
always change the formation, which is something that I think that Barry Robson needs to maybe... I'm sure he has got plan B and plan C written down somewhere, but I feel like we're not seeing it clearly in the stand, for instance. We're not seeing a complete change in formation, whereas St Johnstone last night, see when we went 2-1, when we got the goal back, when they realised that we were in the ascendancy and looking like we were going to score, straight away, centre-half on. Let's kill this now. Let's stop them doing what they're doing. And it just took the sting out of the game completely. Something we should have learned last week. But, yeah, I feel like we don't seem... I know that Barry Robson got right in terms of the change that he did at the time last night to get the goal, but I feel like that maybe a change in formation, and why not try it on Saturday for a start? Nothing to play for. You might as well go and see what it's like. Try a back four. Maybe try Doherty in this sort of number 6 role if you're not going to play Schonborn. Just try things, because at the end of the day, we're going into league action a week, in 10 days? So then that's kind of when you go, well, I'm not really want to try that because I should have had that for 6-7 weeks up until now.
Yeah, we're going full philosophy here, Scott. If the best time to plant a tree and all that, it's the best time to change your formation should have been 2 games ago. The best time after that's going to be now. So second half comes along. Going by the tail end of the first half, I think after their goal, St Johnstone really in control of the game, just being able to play the ball about quite comfortably, getting the players that they needed onto it. Rovers not out of it by any stretch of the imagination, but you sort of saw it was almost like there was a bit of a shift in terms of how the dynamic of the game felt, that Rovers just weren't getting as much clear cut. We had really one chance, but even then it was sort of cannoned back off. I think it was McMullen hit a shot in and just cannoned right back out and back up the pitch. But then second half starts and St Johnstone, to be fair to them, they start straight away on the upper hand. Jamie Gullen goes down with a dive, gets booked, but then Duncan, you've requested this time. Tell us about that second goal. What are your thoughts on it?
Yeah. As I touched on there, I think this is a better example of how this all goes wrong, basically. Very briefly before I get into that, I think you're right. I think St Johnstone do deserve a bit of credit. So, first half, my overriding feeling at halftime was that they had gears that they could go to. They were really in control in the first half without creating an awful lot. But particularly once they got the goal, they didn't really need to. I think in particular, it was Gullen dropping out of the front line and just basically being kind of free roaming, as we know he likes to do in the midfield. They were quite happy to just play passes. They must have made 2 or 3 times as many passes as we did in that first half, because they were just very mobile, keeping the ball away from us. As they didn't really break us down too often. But then, as you say, start the second half, they were a little bit more direct. I thought that Gullen dive was a penalty in real time, by the way. It was quite low down in the stands. It was quite tricky to see. It was only really seeing the reverse angle this morning that it is definitely a dive. He gets a bit of a nudge and then does that really daft thing where he doesn't then just like fall naturally. He does a little jump, which makes it incredibly obvious and it really earns him the yellow card. I think if he just falls, even if he doesn't get the penalty, he will not get booked for it. So credit to the referee, he did get that absolutely spot on. But no, in terms of the goal, this again, just as he reinforces the point I was making, we are all at sea very, very quickly and never recover it. And again, like the first goal, it's McMullen loses the ball in the middle of the park. Fine. Like, that's going to happen. With this one, Easton's on the wing and he turns and he's trying to chip a ball into the middle for Louis Vaughan. Again, fine. That's the kind of pass that Dylan Easton has to be allowed to try, and you can't expect 100% success. Actually, that's not to completely remove the blame from him. Like, if he makes the pass better, the rest of it doesn't happen either. But, as I say, you need to kind of account for the fact that you might sometimes lose the ball in the middle of the park. And what happens from that point is, so first of all, Stevenson's already gone. Stevenson's actually, the first time a St Johnstone player touches the ball, Stevenson's our furthest player forward. He's just beyond where kind of Vaughan and McMullen are. Matthews races to the ball, very much in that's the job he's been given. And we saw that in the first half. We see that with the chances that we create. As soon as we lose the ball, that's your pressing trigger, I would imagine. And he's straight on Jason Holt, who is a very good player. Lovely little turn, effectively takes Matthews out of the game. With that one little turn, plays a nice little pass. It's then turned away. But as it's turned away, the next one trying to make the tackle is Paul Hanlon.
Yep.
And he's 15 yards inside their half. Like, Paul, why are you 75 yards away from goal?
What's a polar bear doing in Arlington, Texas?
Exactly. That is exactly it. And again, I'm not entirely lambasting Paul Hanlon on that, because at a certain point, you kind of have to. When your teammates start to move, you have to try and fill the space. But again, this is why I get the impression that they're doing this all live in their own heads as it unfolds, rather than having thought about it and worked it out in advance and said, right, well, if Steve-O's going to go, you need to come here, and your pressing trigger is 15 yards over the halfway line, Paul. Like, that just doesn't seem right. And then as, I think it's Rhys McAleer, forgive me if it's not, as he breaks away, Hanlon's chasing him, Stevenson's chasing him, but is a million miles away because he was so far forward. Matthews is chasing him, Brown is chasing him, and just before he plays the pass, Fordyce moves to cut out his pass.
Mm-hmm.
5 Rovers players trying to stop Rhys McAleer, who gets out of that incredibly intricate trap by playing a very short pass to Adama Sidibe, because half of our entire team has gone to Rhys McAleer. Jordan Doherty, he has no choice. He has to, put out the first fire first. He has to then come across to cover Sidibe, and all Sidibe has to do is he's got about a quarter of the entire park to find Josh McPake. J. Rowe is at that point sprinting back. He just about gets there in time to be on the scene for McPake scoring the goal, but he's not at any point part of the kind of active defence. You have to kind of spool it right back to see that his starting position is as advanced as Paul Hanlon's. So when it's all going on the one side, he's right up on the other side. Now again, you can see exactly what that plan is. That plan is, if Easton clips the ball into Vonnie and he looks up, he's got his wing back and loads of space on the other side. And dozens of times, by the way, on this podcast, I have bemoaned our lack of fullbacks and wingbacks getting forward to be in support. I understand I am a hypocrite. But in this one, again, that's where the gaps start to form. And there's an element of J. Rowe's not entirely, knocking his pan in to get back. He doesn't really break into a full sprint until Sidibe's got the ball, by which point it's too late. But again, there's actually so much systemically wrong with that goal that it actually feels cheap to criticise any one person individually, because I'm actually not entirely convinced there's one person who could prevent that all by themselves. There's so much going wrong, and there's credit to St Johnstone in there as well. As I say, the way that they spring past Matthews and Hanlon is very, very good. There's a couple of lovely little passes and touches there. That creates the whole thing. But there are shades of primary school football in the way we try and defend that goal, where we're just converging on Rhys McAleer, and it's totally structureless. And again, with a 3-man defence, that should be less likely to happen. you should be more equipped to hand off 2 runners as they come through and still have a man to pick up the third. And we just don't. We've been totally dragged, mostly by ourselves, totally dragged out of position. Basically, you talk a lot about, well, when one of your fullbacks goes, your defence shifts over as a 4. Well, it's like our entire team has all shifted round to the left-hand side and halfway up the left-hand flank, apart from J-Rowe, who's also gone up the right-hand flank. And it means as soon as we lose the ball, it's panic stations, we don't regroup, and the ball ends up the back of the net. And that is where we need to get a hell of a lot better. If this is how we're going to play, and if we're going to have that, if you lose the ball, you snap into it. That means minimum one player is racing out of position. Everybody else needs to be more disciplined, not less. And that's what happened, particularly with that goal last night, as well as the first.
With us playing East Kilbride recently, the talk before we played them, and even after we played them, is you can see how East Kilbride concedes so many goals, and how they'll come up against teams like a Hearts or an Airdrie that are fundamentally better teams, and they will take 7 or 8 against them. And it happened last night because they played Caley Thistle, and was it 6 it finished up on?
Yeah.
The worry for me is that if we're not addressing the issues that seem systemic at the moment, is that becomes kind of like Murray ball with Rafe Rovers, where it's like we get everyone forward, but then we're losing goals at the back. But the Barry Robson one is free at the back, but because we're pressing so high, we've got people up the pitch, then it becomes right, you can see where the flaws are, or Rovers will lose these goals because we can get in at them and make situations where it's 3v2 or 2v1. And that's kind of the worry where you maybe are as a supporter at the moment. I mean, just for you, Ali, do you think it was the way that we'd sort of set up and just going 2-0 down? When we're 2-0 down, are you sitting there thinking, right, we've really failed to address these issues that sort of the fans are seeing?
Yeah, I thought that the second goal that we conceded was like a culmination of the smaller things that were going wrong with the first. Like we were just criminally overstretched. And just to build on what Duncan was saying, when we go forward with the wing backs attacking, 2 centre mids, Brown and Matthews, also go forward. And I thought normally you would have one of the midfielders dropping back. And then when you look at the fact that we've got out the back 3, you've got 2 guys in their mid to late 30s. You're asking basically 3 defenders to cover a heck of a lot of ground, time and time again. And they just see, like I saw it at the Falkirk game. It's against the better opposition that you're seeing it, but against the Falkirk game and in this game, teams that have got quick runners that are able to interchange the ball really quickly, they're just pulling them left, right and centre, and we're just overstretched constantly. And when we went 2-0 down, I turned around and said to Scott that I thought St Johnstone would probably go on to get a third unless we changed it drastically, which thankfully we did.
Yeah, I mean, the first of the changes came up. We swap Lewis Vaughan for Jack Hamilton comes on. So he adds a presence up top. And then maybe a bit more of a surprising one, Kai Montague. I know that, I'd sort of spoken about it in terms of the East Kilbride game. And a lot of the sort of mood music about him is that with his inexperience and not having the game time before, he comes on and he replaces Dylan Easton. And what was probably quite an assured performance. But for you, Scott, bit of a quiet night for those coming off, Dylan Easton and Lewis Vaughan. Do you think that's maybe just sort of the more circumstantial, given that, again, Lewis Vaughan coming back from a long-term injury, relatively speaking, played a lot of football sort of pre-season / League Cup, and then Dylan Easton being injured? What were your thoughts about that in terms of the performances there?
First of all, it's the correct subs to make, because they two, for whatever reason, just weren't at the races all night. I mean, Easton obviously had 1 or 2 moments where he gets through for the penalty that should have been. But other than that, nothing was coming off for Easton the whole night. Vaughan the same. Something that actually I'm getting really frustrated with Lewis Vaughan is it's crept into his game, I would say, in the last sort of 12 months. and it seems to be now because he can't get away from players after all these injuries, is that he seems to be trying to back into defenders, and then just any contact he gets, he's trying to get a foul and go to the ground. I'm like, you can't be doing that all the time. And to be fair, I don't think I've seen one foul being given against Louis Vaughan all pre-season or all League Cup, because it's almost like the refs are even seeing it before it's happening. Like, I don't know if it is the lack of pace that's making him think about doing this, but it's something that I think it's crept into his game. And I've seen other people mention it as well, that he just, for some reason, is doing it. But he also, his touches last night, and he just wasn't getting involved as you would like. I do feel also that he was a bit stranded at times, being that number 9 up top. Easton's not near him. He's then not got anybody. He's not got either of the midfielders near him. I just felt that whole sort of final third of the park for that first 55 minutes was very isolated a lot of the time. So that, I do think that absolutely, and the fact that there just didn't seem to be any energy coming from anywhere, even after half time. It was like we came out the same pace, nothing really changed, and you were just like, well, we need to inject something into this team to get it going. And then within a minute, we managed to score, and it's almost like, well, subs work for a start, Barry, but it was, for a start, I'm so glad it was Jack Hamilton, because Jack Hamilton, I can imagine over the last year especially, has been so pissed off that the fact that he keeps getting injured and it's the same injuries reoccurring. He's now been away for surgery, seems to be all fixed, and he says that he's as strong as it has been for basically since he left Livy, which is good to hear. But the fact that Jack Hamilton, I know that me and Ali have spoke about this before, but Jack Hamilton was the sort of striker the first 2 seasons we've had him. He's needed 5 chances to score a goal. Last night, he takes a great touch and just puts it into the bottom corner. You go, well, if this is the Jack Hamilton we're going to have this season, then brilliant. It's somebody that, it actually looked like a 15 to 20 goal scorer finish. Just bang, go. It was a Brian Graham-esque goal, is what it was. And so, and it was also great, I know he didn't mean it, but Ross Matthews with the dummy, even though he did try to shoot. But
I think that's been quite charitable, Scott.
But it's funny you say that though, Scott. It's exactly in my notes. I have Brian Graham-esque finish. Literally exactly what I've got in my notes for that.
It was that sort of goal that you would expect him to score week in, week out. So if we can get Jack Hamilton to be that penalty box striker, he also, like, obviously, when we go later into the game, he was giving their centre-half so much problems in the air, which they were not getting for 55 minutes out of Lewis Vaughan, because Lewis Vaughan isn't going to be beaten. I mean, both of their centre-halves were easily 6'3", 6'4" last night. Neither of them had an issue with Louis Vaughan, whereas Jack Hamilton came on, he's climbing up for headers, and both of them went down to the ground trying to climb for fouls, because they're like, oh shit, the tide's turning here, what's this that's came on against us? But it was absolutely the correct sub to make, and it was just so good to see these two coming on and making an impact instantly, because then it just, for the next 20 minutes that we'll probably talk about, he literally, if anybody was going to score next, it only looked like us.
Yeah, absolutely. To go back to your sort of initial point with Dylan Easton and Lewis Vaughan, I mean, at this level of football, we spoke about it before we started recording, with relation to Josh Ray. I think that you've always got a caveat at this level of football that players are going to have off games. I suppose at any level of football, but this level of football in particular, players are going to have quiet nights where just things don't come off for them. So, particularly given where they've been and what they've been through, I could say with Dylan Easton and Lewis Vaughan, that, like, you obviously offer them the leeway, and I fully appreciate it's not like you writing them off, Scott. It's no. Pretty much the opposite. I think it's because you set such a high standard with them, and you have that expectation of these guys can bring the magic moments that as a fan that you want to see. With Jack Hamilton, fully agree. I think a lot of it's also the service that he gets. You look at the players that set him up. So we mentioned already Jay Rose, the one that gets the assist, but it's actually McMullen that feeds him in as well. It wasn't a surprise to see McMullen remain on the pitch. throughout the game. I think he was the main sort of focal point in attack and why we brought him in. You can, of course, sort of point to the East Kilbride game. He had a lot of chances, didn't manage to take any of them, unfortunately. But even last night, there was moments where, as Duncan alluded to and mentioned earlier on, he'll have points in his game where he'll beat a man and then a player slips and he takes the ball and he's driving forward and you think, yep, this is it. This is what we're wanting. And I feel like a lot of people have spoken about last season and the start of last season in particular. I know a lot of references get made to the squad that we had at the end of last season, but certainly for me, compared to the beginning of last season, there's a huge difference in terms of the squad with the style of football that we're playing and the creativity levels that we've got. Particularly McMullen, I feel like, is a player that can help us on that front. But yeah, with Jack Hamilton, absolutely delighted to see him get off the mark. And hopefully it can just give him a bit of peace of mind and sort of an opportunity to show people, because I feel like a lot of people had, particularly at the end of last season, had just written him off completely. A big chance for him to go on, kick on, and sort of, as you say, be that penalty box striker. We've seen it before. If he gets a chance in the box fed into him, and if he gets the right supply, there's every chance that we can have a really, really strong asset within our team.
Just, sorry, Robbie, before you move on that, a couple of things on this kind of striker's role. More so last night than in the other games. Appreciate it's only one game, but I didn't really feel like Vaughan was asked to play as a 9 at all. I felt he was too far away for the goal, basically the entire time he was on the park. And I don't... He's technically such a good player, and he's obviously not your sort of archetypal lead-the-line big striker. But when you look at the pace that's in that St Johnstone back line, if every time you give the ball to Louis Vaughan, he's 40 yards out, you're asking him to score wonder goals every time he gets the ball. Like, now, it's that, or you get the intricate passing to kind of go through it, and that's probably our best chance at the moment. But I don't know, I didn't feel like... I don't love this fluid front three that we're going with. I feel like it's a bit... I don't know, a bit
Amy?
Not using everybody to their best.
Yeah.
Aye, that's kind of what it is. It's asking everybody to do the same thing when they're all very different. And even when Jack Hamilton came on, he didn't go on and sort of stand on the edge of the D. He came on and played the position that Vaughan was playing. But as you say, Scott, the one big advantage that he's got is if he starts 30 yards out and slightly to the left, it gives him the space to be on the move when a ball comes up, and then he's great in the air. I mean, in terms of the goal, not to take it away from Jack Hamilton at all, but I think Louis Vaughan would have scored that goal as well.
Yeah.
I don't think that necessarily was like, oh, there's Jack Hamilton on the penalty spot doing something that Vaughan wouldn't have done. I just think that was the kind of only chance we created for a striker. The other chance we had, as you say, it's McMullen nipping away and getting round. And again, I think there are poorer sides who that will work against. I didn't love it last night. You know, if we were playing, let's take Ross County as the other kind of favourite for our division. If we were playing Ross County next, I wouldn't want to see a lot of the same things that we saw, because I just don't think they particularly worked. And that's one of them. I don't like Vaughan playing off the left when you've not got another striker. It's fine if you've got Hamilton as your furthest forward. Then you can play Vaughan slightly further back and you can ask him to roam about. But when he is effectively your best chance of scoring a goal, I don't think you're getting anywhere near the best out of him.
Yeah.
Station him out off the left, 40 yards for goal.
I mean, for me, I feel like it's. I'd sort of spoken about it before, but it does feel kind of like a 3-4-3 in terms of the way that we play, because the wing backs are basically out wide. They're almost part of the midfield. You've got your three centre backs, and then it's like you've got two wingers and a forward up top. I think a lot of the success that we had last season, especially at the end, I know Pollock gets injured against Ayr, was it? And then we don't have him for the rest of the season. But we use the sort of directness that you get with Jamie Gullen, and then you can have someone feeding off that, or someone like a Dylan Easton causing carnage behind. And when you've got the two wingers, you can see it in sort of small phases, like, for instance, the penalty shout in the first half. But it's taken time to grow and develop that. And again, I think when you have a League Cup, that you really need to be winning certainly at least 2 of your first 3 games to have an opportunity of going through in that final one. It does make it a very, very quick acid test for trying out a new formation. From the 56th minute, when we get that goal, right up to 10 minutes before the end of the game, I think Rovers grew into the game looking for an equaliser. It was quite up and down the pitch. 78th minute, we do, well, actually before that, Jay Rowe and Kai Montague both have opportunities. Montague with a shot from the edge of the box, and Jay Rowe has a chance that sort of flashes wide after the keeper makes a really, really good save, gets palm to it and sort of puts it wide. And then on the 78th minute, we make our final 3 changes. So Richard Chin comes on for Jay Rowe, Josh Mullen for Ross Matthews, and Lewis Gibson for Lewis Stevenson. Then comes the second contentious shout. So, Scott, what did you make of the second penalty shout? Do you think that was, I mean, in comparison to the first one, maybe a bit more sort of, bit of a different shout in terms of the referee can clearly see it, but where was your opinion on it?
It's funny because I'm almost completely, I'm not almost, I am completely reversed now of how I was in the stand to how I was watching the highlights. So the first one, too far away, couldn't tell about Dylan Easton, whether he got the ball or not in the ground. Second half, I was up calling for it because it looked in time like he'd actually halved Montague, basically. Whereas I've watched the highlights, I went, well, that's an absolute stonewaller on Dylan Easton, and then this one I'm not sure about. Like, I genuinely, like, part of me goes, I could see it being given, but also I could see it not being given. So I'm very on. I don't like to be on the fence with it, but I genuinely am with this one because I can see both ways of why you would give it and why you wouldn't. But well, because I'm a Rovers fan, it would have been nice to get it. But yeah, it's just funny how it's completely reversed because I thought that was a stonewaller, and yet I'm now saying that it's Dylan Easton's that was a stonewaller, and that one wasn't it.
I think the defender is very, very fortunate that Kai Montague basically passes the ball into his chest as he's sliding in. Because I was the same as you, Scott. At the time, I was roaring for it, and I was absolutely could not have been convinced otherwise that that wasn't a penalty kick. But looking at it back, as I say, the boy's diving in, and he does crash into Montague. But as he's diving in, Montague kind of knocks the ball into him, and I think it's enough to say, like, he's got something on the ball. He's made a block, and has then kind of clattered into Montague. So, I'm quite happy to say I don't think that's a penalty now.
Yeah.
And I did not think I would be saying that last night.
Yeah, I mean, with that one, it's a lot clearer to see why the referee's been of the opinion of, like, it's not a penalty. I feel like with the first one, there's an explanation for why he's not given a penalty, as opposed to it was or it wasn't. I think it was a penalty, but it's just been blindsided in the way that the ball's gone after. And then, Scott, just to come back to you, because the other two have had the privilege of talking about St Johnstone goals, I'm not letting you away with this. Sidibe flicking it on for Kirk. What did you make of that? Obviously kills the game. Tough one to take, given the circumstances and sort of how Rover had sort of fought back in, but also as well, questions at defence, and again, whereabout are you sort of attributing sort of the autopsy to be looking at?
Yeah, as I said earlier, after discussing Hamilton's goal, like at that point in that whole period between Hamilton's goal and Mackenzie Kirk, or whatever his name is, the boy Kirk's goal, that for me, that period, St Johnstone did not really. I can't think that they were really much out of their half. We were totally on top of them in this end, and it genuinely like we were going to score next. And then at that point, I think you're probably considering we're going to score a third and win the game. But that it's not anywhere near as bad as the second goal in terms of everybody being completely out of shape and out of place. It's another one, though, that I'm screaming out for. We need pace at the back because, firstly, you've got also, again, I've said that Fordyce has not had a good game, and that kind of just confirmed it, that third goal, because he's came to the ball. I know that Sidibe's knocked it on. Fordyce is then came to get it, and he's missed it, and then he's running through mud or whatever it is to try and catch up with Kirk, but he's got no chance to catch him. And then Doherty, who's got slightly more pace than Fordyce, also isn't catching him. It's the fact that Kirk doesn't even take a really good touch at all. The first two touches, I don't think he takes any good touches, and yet he's still, because he's got some pace, he's able to still run away from them and get through. Now, at the time, this is another one where I completely changed my mind from in the ground to the highlights, was the amount of fans last night that were howling at Josh Ray for no coming off his line for that. Now, I was also questioning Josh Ray at this point, because I thought it looked in real time that he should have been further or closer to the edge of his box to make that decision. After watching the highlights, that's not Josh Ray's fault. That has came from Fordyce pushing up too far when he should have been sat in a little bit and allowed Doherty, who was marking Kirk, to go for that ball. Fordyce has then got to be the one, or sort of the last man that's kind of, if Doherty loses it and Kirk goes in behind, then Fordyce is there to step in. But the fact that they two have both gone in for it and Kirk's got ahead of them, then Ray's in mixed minds. But I just can't say that it's that clear cut that it was Josh Ray's fault to be coming for that ball. I just think that Fordyce has been completely caught out and been caught out for his pace. And I do think, I know we discussed it earlier, but I'm almost thinking if Barry Robson's going to continue with this back three, I'm almost willing to give up one of these defenders for somebody that's got pace, because Doherty and Hanlon are both very good defenders as it is, both very good in the air as well. I would just give for it, and again, I feel like I'm only digging out Callum Fordyce when all three of them didn't have a great game last night, but he is the slowest out of the three by quite some distance. And I just think that if you can get somebody in there that's going to, or you put somebody that's going to play a slightly more defensive role in midfield, I mean,
whoever could
somebody,
that be?
But again, he's not pacey, but he's somebody that can stop danger by being there and covering if we're going to be going venturing about the place, which we were for the second and the third goal.
I mean, Duncan, for you, I'm just going to ask the question. With every game that passes that he doesn't play, does Sean Byrne fall into that category of becoming a better footballer? Or for you, do you think it's a step that needs to be taken?
No, I don't think that, actually, because I think typically when you say that about someone, it's kind of a backhanded compliment because they are actually shite.
Wouldn't be saying that about Sean, to be fair.
No, exactly. But so that's what I mean. When you say he gets better every time he doesn't play, you're basically, I don't know the guy, I'm sorry to dig him out. We do it all the time. Lee Bryce is immediately the player who comes to mind. Where it was we hadn't really seen anything of him. And people were like, get Bryce on, I'm sure he will be better than this. That's not the case with Sean Byrne. Everybody knows exactly how good he is. And that's the judgment that everybody's making when they're saying Sean Byrne should be playing. Yeah. It's because we know how good he is. My slight reservation with it is I don't think a straight swap broadly fixes any of these issues, at least not without creating others. I think if you just go, right, taking Ross Matthews out, I'm going to put Sean Byrne in, but we're just going to play exactly the same way, I think all your same problems exist.
Yeah.
And probably in that case, Ross Matthews is actually slightly better at the very specific job that they are being given. But that's the bit I kind of disagree with. But again, I don't think it necessarily... I think you end up having to rebuild half the side just to make it work again. Because if you just say, right, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take out one of my two kind of charge and bull midfielders because I want Sean Byrne to play because he's better. He's a better football player and he's slightly more adept at sitting and not charging about. If you just make that change, what you've then got is 3 centre-halves and a dedicated sitting midfielder. And I don't think you necessarily are fixing any of your other problems. You might not lose the ball quite so often in the middle of the park, but you're also then going to be much less likely at that snapping in, turn it and goal, which is basically our only real kind of attacking plan at the moment. I think the kind of core of this issue, and again, I apologise for taking a short question and turning it into a 10-minute answer, but you know me well enough by now. I think we're basically trying to ask 2 people to play a 3-man midfield. That, I think, is the core issue to try and distill what we're doing at the moment. Is we're basically going, right, Ross Matthews, Scott Brown, they both have a lot of the attributes you would want in a well-rounded midfielder. So I'm going to play both of them, and I'm basically going to ask both of them to do everything all the time. It's quite like an old-fashioned 4-4-2 style of like a central midfield pairing. It's like 2 all-rounders who'll just do the whole lot. But the formation that we're playing doesn't really suit that. What you really need is 3 specific midfielders. So what you need is a Sean Byrne, who will be the deepest of the 3, who doesn't charge out of position anywhere near as much, but does retain shape, does recycle the ball, does all the stuff that Sean Byrne is brilliant at. You've then got either Scott Brown or Ross Matthews, who does the job broadly that they're doing just now. The box-to-box, all that kind of stuff. Great. But then what you also have, which we don't have at the moment, is instead of either Paul McMullen or Dylan Easton, who we're using as like dual 10s, effectively second strikers, that they're very much attackers who want to attack. What you need, and ironically and unfortunately, the missing piece in this is Sam Stan. That's what you need. What you need is a guy who is a midfielder who will be the third midfielder who attacks from midfield. He doesn't midfield from attack, which is what Easton and McMullen will do. And that fundamentally, I think, is the issue. But this is why it's not just as simple as saying, oh, just stick Sean Byrne in. Because he doesn't then... He's not going to really help you in your using 2 men to do the job of 3. But this is, I think, you need to then come up with a better plan, almost. Now, the thing is, and again, this is, I can hear Blair shouting and bawling as he's listening to this, which is we ended last season doing this, and we went however many, 10, 11 games without losing?
Yeah.
So it's not entirely without merit. And I suppose what I'm saying is, against better sides, and fundamentally after last night, I think St Johnstone are a better side. I was actually quite impressed with them. I felt like, as I said already, I felt like they had gears to go to that they never really needed, whereas we were scrapping and fighting for every minute of the game. I think, against a better side, I think we need to come up with a better plan. And honestly, I think what I would do, if it was me, is I would just ask Scott Brown to do his best Sam Stanton impression on the park. I don't want him to quit and leave. Let Byrne sit, let Matthews be the box-to-box, and then have sort of Brown ahead of him, doing that slightly more kind of number 8 into a 10 type thing.
So I would probably say I fall more into I'm going to create a term, the Hopcroftian school of thought, of that it was working towards the end of last season, and I think that I feel for me it's more systemic in the way that, because I spoke about it earlier on about how we've now got sort of 2 wingers up top, almost in the shape of like, we're using Easton more as a wide sort of attacking forward along with McMullen. Again, it's such a hard balance because you always feel like there's someone on that pitch that's going to be losing out if we make the change. So you switch to 2 central forwards say you use Hamilton and Vaughan up top, it's like you're out and out forwards, and move Easton into that more attacking midfield role that you can sort of know him for. Because I think that he was doing very, very well there. And for me, I think that there's a lot of talk about like replacing Sam Stanton, but I feel like if we have Easton in that role, it does mitigate it to a degree, because he can cause that sort of, he's a bit deeper to be able to do a bit more work. But then at the same time, you don't want to lose the sort of pace and outright directness that McMullen offers you. And we've obviously signed him for a reason. He's fresh in the door. You're not wanting to be like, okay, well, that was good, but we're going to put you onto the bench. And it's much the same with Sean Byrne, in the sense that you know that you've got a very, very good player there. It's just about trying to figure it out in the sense of where the pieces are and how to put them together to something that's going to provide that coherence, and especially the sort of rigidity in defence that I feel like we're lacking at the moment. Just for you, Ali, obviously I think the last time you were on was just as the League Cup games were beginning. Do you think it's systemic, or are you thinking it's individual? Where would you look in terms of any changes going forward?
It's funny because I started off disagreeing with Duncan and thinking that
And then I spoke.
bringing Sean Byrne would fix a lot of the problems. It kind of talked me out of it a little, in that I think that it is more systemic. That being said, I don't agree with the complete lack of using Sean Byrne, because we've sat here and talked about how would it work if we pulled Matthews and played Byrne deeper and allowed Brown to do the box-to-box role. Well, maybe Barry Robson should try it. Then we'll have the answer. I think we definitely need to bring in another centre back with pace. I'd like to see another. I mean, I don't think we ever replaced Sam Stanton in the second half of last season. I know we finished the season well, and I know that Dylan Easton mitigates it to an extent, but he is not Sam Stanton. They are very different players. I would like to see a player of that ilk, and they're very hard to find, come in. I want us to have selection problems, because if you have selection problems, it means that we have options and we have different systems that we can play. At the moment, it feels like we have one system, set starting 11, and great, now we can throw Jack Hamilton on to shake it up a bit. But that's about it. We need more options in the squad. You know, whether or not the system can be tweaked to suit the players we have, that's one argument. I would still argue that we need more options, and that's what we don't have. And actually, where I sit just now is my concern is, if we just play the same way and we only have one system, you play teams 4 times in this league, they're going to figure it out second time we play them. By the third or fourth, we're going to have to change it up. So I don't know. I think there's a lot of work to do, to be honest. I'm less optimistic than I was.
Just to come in about the whole systemic thing, I think personally there's 3 teams this season that we need to think of another plan to play against, and it's Ross County, St Johnstone and Ayr. Because they're the 3 right now that stand out to me. It's the 3 that are going to be the most competitive at the top end, and probably the 3 that will score the most goals. Now, and we've just seen St Johnstone, so we kind of know how they're going to be. Ayr are free scoring again, as they were this time last season. Now that they've got Dowds back, Oakley's fit, they've brought in Dom Thomas, who's basically replaced Jay Henderson, so that they've still got all these goals coming in. Ross County have got goals galore up front with Jordan White and Ronan Hale as well. If it was me, for these 3 games, or 3 teams that we're going to play against, I would almost have a different plan and formation for them 3 than I would the other 6 that you're going to play. Because the other 6, we're more... I think our plan probably works for the other 6 teams. But these 3, this is the 3 that I would go, right, Sean Byrne, you're coming in to play the number 6 role. Matthews is the destroyer. Bruni's going to play the more box-to-box role. You drop one of the centre-halves and just play a back 4, and you make the decision out of J. Rowe and Jordan Doherty who's going to play that back 4 role. I actually almost would say to J. Rowe, it's just no the game that we want to be bombing up and down the line, and I would play Jordan Doherty as the right back and just play a sort of 4-3-3 or a 4-3-1-2 and go Jack Hamilton up top if you want. But that's the way that I would almost attack it this season of, these are the three strongest teams in the league, and it's actually been quite clear to see with all the summer business that these three are the favourites to be in the top 4 in the league anyway. And that's how I think that we need to attack it. Put it this way, Barry Robson is not going to look at it that way, because otherwise we would have seen it by now, I think.
I think it's a really good point, and I mean, to borrow a phrase of yours, Robbie, that a couple of seasons ago you were using for Morton, I think Barry Robson's Rovers are in the business of rustling jimmies.
Ooh.
It's a slightly different manner. It's not the big kind of stick out a load of 7-foot guys and just, kick and punch anything that moves. It's much more of a high press, all this kind of stuff. But if you think about the game against Elgin, first of all, right? And this now, to be fair, does also apply to the East Kilbride game. It's a very glib thing to say, but set the full-time score aside and the pattern of the game. Think about all the chances we got across those games. Any of the ones that I can think of, they're all putting the other team under pressure, turning the ball over, forcing mistakes. Very little of it starts with us. Josh Ray's got the ball in hand. We play it out for the back. We make some probing passes, and then we find, the killer through ball. It's not really the way that we play. It's fast and it's furious and it's, nick the ball off the ball in the defensive midfield. Like that chance right at the beginning where Easton gets that, should get the penalty. But that's exactly to your point, Scott. The better teams in the division, and whether it's those three or whether it's someone else, who knows, that the course of the season will tell us. But ultimately, I mean, are you going to go up to Dingwall and frighten those guys into giving the ball up 20 yards from their own goal? Maybe. But it's not going to happen anywhere near as often as it does to East Kilbride. And if you do that, you have to stick the ball in the goal afterwards, crucially. But I think you're absolutely right. That this kind of one size fits all, and that has been always, I think, everybody's biggest criticism of Barry Robson, is that he's just applying the same thing every time, and it has its limitations. And I see it's so based on sort of outworking and almost bullying the opposition as in that sense. But you saw it with shades last night with St Johnstone, where they were just passing around us at times. And that's how you'll get around that Rovers side. And that's where we need this plan B. And and beyond that, I also just think there needs to be just more rotation.
Yeah.
You've got a squad for a reason. All that shit I was talking a minute ago about squad roles and all this kind of stuff, I believe all of that. But also, they're all football players and they're all good. Or at least, most of them are. Sean Byrne's great. You could ask him to go and do what Ross Matthews is doing. And he's not going to look like a fish climbing a tree. He can do it. It's maybe just not exactly what he'd love to be doing. So I think we do definitely just need to see a bit more rotation, a bit more versatility, and a little less of this kind of zealous fixation on these are my 11 best players. This is the one way that we play. Because, Ali, you said there about second or third time you play teams that have worked this out. 8 teams in the division have already played this once.
Well,
you can take quarter 4. It's broadly the same team doing the same thing.
We go back to last season. We played Falkirk over 2 weeks. We win the first one away at theirs in the Scottish Cup. And we do that in a manner that nobody expected. They turn back and they come back to us and do it in a manner that we didn't expect, which completely threw us off. For me, there's a lot of shades of sort of the rigidity of what we saw in the start of Barry Robson's tenure, and I suppose you don't really notice that when you're winning games. But yeah, I think it was Graham that mentioned it in our group chat. You look back at the Queen's Park away game at Hampden on the last day of the season, and Sean Byrne was one of the best players on the pitch that night. Just completely controlled the middle of the park. So yes, would love to see him back in, but whether that happens in the near future, I feel like our season's really going to be dictated by the next few moves that we make in terms of, firstly, what we do in terms of any permanent moves, whether that's Darrell O'Connor, whether that's others. And then on top of that, how good is our loan business going to be? Because you're seeing a lot of clubs looking at loan deals now, particularly coming out from the old firm. Aaron Partick Thistle have already made a few moves. So yeah, it's it's tough to know what you're going to get. I know that an article had been put out, I think, by the Edinburgh Evening News talking to Finlay Pollock. He's a few weeks back from returning from injury, but Derek McInnes has already said he's going to be part of his first team plans going forward. So that's one that previously, before, we've had a lot of time for him. We know what he's all about. But might be one that's not on the table this time around. So we need to look at different options. But again, that's where John Potter earns his keep, where obviously others that are involved in terms of their research. We'll move on from the St Johnstone game. It just took us an hour and 20 minutes to get through that. But just before we go on, we'll have a very brief preview for the Caley Thistle game, because obviously the end of the League Cup tenure. But before we talk about that, again, just to raise a bit of awareness, Liam Wilson, again, we mentioned it a few podcasts ago, he's doing a walk. It's just in a few days' time, 26th of July. He's going to be walking the 40 miles from Forth Valley Royal Hospital to Simpson's Edinburgh Royal Infirmary. So far to date, he's raised £4,529. Really important cause there. What we'll do, again, we'll leave a link in the show notes to promote that. He's a first-team scout of the club. He was in front at the East Kilbride game doing charity bucket raises for that. So, if you do have the opportunity to donate, if you're in that position, we will leave a link there if you do want to. Caley at home. A few familiar faces there, Scott. We've got Joe Chalmers, Ross Monroe, David Witherspoon. Obviously, we've all played against them in recent times. But then, of course, the return of the prodigal son, the missing man, the man who disappeared, Ross Milne. Looking forward to seeing him back at Starks Park.
I've forgotten who you're on about, but no, I think it'll be Caley are a weird one because they have signed a few familiar faces, like you say, but at the same time, they almost to me feel like a team that I just don't know. I've not watched any of their highlights of the 3 games they played to now, so I don't know how they're playing or what sort of style they're playing or anything like that. So for me, going to the game on Saturday, it'll be good just to see what sort of standard they're at. I know that they've just went and put 6 past East Kilbride, but we should have put 6 past East Kilbride. So they maybe just took the chances that we didn't, and then they only lost in the 90th minute to St Johnstone. But again, I know that Duncan said St Johnstone potentially had gears to go up, but I still felt they didn't create a lot of chances that made me worried about St Johnstone this season. I still felt that if we sort the issues that are clearly glaringly clear for us to see, I think once we sort them, then we're going to be a much better match for somebody like a St Johnstone. So that's what I'm kind of hoping for going into Saturday, is that we start to see us actually correcting these mistakes. And also going into this game, this is a game that I would even be saying to Aidan Glavin, give him 90 minutes, because at the end of the day, when's the next time he's going to play a game potentially? I get that Barry Robson has very rarely changed his team, but I still would like to see another game for this young lad, because at the end of the day, what if Josh Ray gets injured 2 months into the season? We don't know what this young lad's got. He had 30 minutes or something at Linlithgow, and that's all we've seen. So I now that we're out, I would actually say to him and go and play him just to see what he's like. And then the same for say Jack Hamilton. I'd be starting him, get more minutes into his legs, get him ready, give Stevenson another start, get him ready. All these guys that have been coming in to the season from injuries, these are the guys that we need to be playing on Saturday to get them ready for Queen's Park. And I've been saying it for basically since the East Kilbride game, that we now need to be playing guys that need minutes so that they're ready for the league season. So that's more what I'm looking for going into Saturday's game. And as I said about Inverness, I don't really know too much about them in terms of what sort of styles they're going to come at us with. But I'm sure it'll still be a very competitive game, because Barry Robson doesn't want to lose a game of football. So I think we'll still be up for it. It's just a case of, will he do what I or a few others have mentioned in the last 24 hours in terms of, we're out, let's make some rotations and start playing some guys that need minutes.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, for a club like Raith Rovers nowadays, having a meaningless game is actually something that's very, very hard to come by. I mean, the tail end of the 23-24 season, I think it was, so the day that we played Arbroath and beat them 5-0 after we failed to win the league, and Dundee United obviously go on and win the title. That's really the last time that you're looking at a game that's had some meaning for us, because even the League Cup went down to the final game last season. Duncan, for you, would you be bleeding in Aidan Glavin, a few of the other lads? What are your sort of thoughts going into this one, or do you think it's one to maybe try and hone the system that we're already doing? Can you do that at the same time?
I think you have to try something different for the sake of variety, as much as anything. I think we've seen a lot of the same recently. Personally, I'm not a huge fan of swapping the goalkeeper out. That's a pure kind of personal preference thing. I don't know. I just if I never saw a backup keeper for the rest of my life, I'd be quite happy. Just play my first team keeper all the time.
You should go and play. You should go and watch teams that play in the conference in England. Half of them teams don't even put a backup keeper on their bench.
Well, that would suit me. And I'm just not overly. I don't think you can ever learn a huge amount. It would be nice for us to see Aidan Glavin, I suppose. I'm not convinced Barry Robson's going to learn a huge amount. He gets one game before the league season starts. I'd maybe feel slightly different about that if it was like a Tuesday into a Saturday. The fact there's a full week in between, I'm not overly bothered in that sense. But in front of Josh Ray, for old time's sake, I'm looking at a 4-2-3-1. Just give the people what they want. The people being me and you, Scott. I think, to be fair, though, once you kind of set that out, there's a lot of different ways that you can go. And I think that probably is. It's a squad management issue more than anything else. Not really anything to be gained by actually winning the game. But what I will say is, not going to be a nice place to be if we don't win that game. So it might be meaningless in the sense of progression, but we did just get beat by East Kilbride and then lose to St Johnstone. Don't want to lose 3 games on the bounce. And presumably, Robbie, you'll know this. Caley Thistle presumably still do have something to play for. They'll be hoping.
Yeah, they absolutely do. They're up to 6 points at the moment, so 9 particularly given that they scalped East Kilbride. And I think they beat, was it 3-1 they beat Elgin? So if they can do it against us, that's them. I'd imagine the likelihood is that they'll be in a solid position to progress to the next round, having only lost to St Johnstone. Ali, Duncan mentions there about the potential mood. In terms of that, how much are you taking into this final game? Looking at, obviously, I'm saying it's a meaningless game, but then there's obviously the question of momentum as well, and almost a feeling, because there is a lot of frustration at the current sort of situation with the club. A lot of the sort of discussions on social media about sort of investment, where the club's going, the sort of discussions around that. How important is it that Rovers go out and put on a good performance and potentially get a win, even if we're not in a position to potentially go through to the next round?
I think it's a really tricky one, because I just checked the table for the best runners-up, and Inverness are 5th at the moment, and they're a point behind the 3 teams that are, well, Ross County and St Mirren are currently 2nd and 3rd, so they're going to come down looking for a win to nail it on. A draw leaves it open for them. So for us, I think, for me anyway, I think it's more about getting minutes in certain people's legs and changing the system a little, trying something different. I mean, I had written down here, Hamilton must start, Vaughan must be rested. I think this is the kind of game we need to manage Louis Vaughan's minutes. He's played a lot of pre-season, a lot of League Cup, banged in a few goals, brilliant, rest him. Get Jack Hamilton up front, put him in a system that suits Hamilton, whether that means that you go with McMullen and Chin out wide, maybe, whether you rest Easton as well and you bring Montague in. I'm more interested in getting players on the pitch and trying something a bit different. I don't think that we need to just play the same system for the sake of it. I think that Barry Robson's going to do that anyway against Queen's Park. We could probably name the team that is going to start against Queen's Park if we're honest. So get some of the other lads in. And in terms of the broader picture at the moment, recruitment and investment from the board, I think they've still got credit in the bank. I would like to see more faces in, but we're competing against. It's tricky because this year you're competing against two teams that have come down with parachute payments. So you're going to have to try and compete with those. You're going to have to spend over and above. I think we're being shrewd with our business, and I'm kind of happy to keep the faith.
Yeah.
But I can understand why people are getting jittery. The only thing I would say is that the loan market, I think, extends further into. Is it going to go into September?
Yeah.
So even if we're getting further into August, I think we will still see loan players come in to bolster the squad at some point.
Yeah, almost definitely.
I don't know if we're going to end up having a cooperation agreement with somebody like Hearts or Rangers or whatever, but if that can be fleshed out, that might give us a bit of peace of mind in terms of bringing players in. I don't want it. I'm just saying.
Nearly got through a whole episode without saying cooperation agreement.
We definitely need two in the door, I would say. Ideally before the league starts, but if not, before we get to the end of August. And the two that I think needs to happen is a centre-half, and then preferably this sort of Sam Stanton-esque sort of role. Because right now, what you've got on the bench is actually Kai Montague and the boy Rayside, and Callum Hanna's your defensive option as it stands. Now, no offence to these young lads, they're very young, very inexperienced, but in the Scottish Championship, if we've got any thoughts about trying to be in that top four, that can't be your guys to be relying on as defensive cover or midfield cover. You need to have either a Ross Matthews drops out the team and that's on your bench with Byrne or whatever, and then you've brought in somebody to play that Sam Stanton role, and then you bring in a centre-half, at least then you've got a centre-half in the bench that's far more experienced than a Callum Hanna. Then you can at least say, right, we've got a little bit of a bulkier squad. Everyone knows that we're not going to have this 26, 27, 28-man squad at what Hamilton had last season or what St Johnstone are running with this season. Everybody's got different budgets. We're going to be closer to a Morton. And Barry Robson said that he's running a tighter squad. So I think, ideally, you're probably only going to get two or three more in the door, I think.
Yeah.
This is the tricky thing with it. I mean, first of all, just very briefly, I didn't mention it. I thought Kai Montague was very good.
Yeah.
Last night, quite clearly not had a great time second half against East Kilbride. He was very good last night. Just wanted to point that out. I would start him on Saturday because he's the closest we've got stylistically to that kind of Sam Stanton type. And actually, to be perfectly honest, you're not going to get a replacement. You might as well try and grow your own. But it's a tricky place that we are with the squad, because actually, as Barry Robson's very clearly shown, the starting 11 is very strong. You know, if you're going out recruiting, with the caveat that with centre half, as you say, Scott, there's pace is a very clear attribute that we don't really have, so you can go and get that. But if you're thinking about, right, can I go and improve this starting 11? Like, can I go into the market just now and find a better centre half than a Paul Hanlon or a Callum Fordyce? Can I find a better striker than a Lewis Vaughan or a Jack Hamilton? Like, probably not. Not with the budget that we've got, because if these guys are out there, they're going to be picked up by a Ross County or a St Johnstone. And we've seen that across this window already. So then what you end up with is, well, if we're not going to sign someone to go into the starting 11, what we absolutely do need is a bigger squad. We need backup for this. But guys don't sign up to be a backup option in the middle of July because they've got the whole window to wait. These guys are happy to wait and see, because maybe actually Queen of the South will offer them a gig where they might actually start every week. And maybe you'd rather be starting for Queen of the South and be a backup to the Rovers. Now, by the middle of August, nobody's phoned up and offered you a starting jersey, then maybe you're happier. That's when your loans kick in and all that kind of stuff. So I suspect it's a case of we're just going to have to be patient, because I don't think we're going to sign any starters.
Yeah,
I just don't think the money is there to override the kind of bigger fish in the water for us to go in and make like another sort of marquee signing. So it'll be backups, and we'll just, I think, have to wait for them.
I think to go back to the investment point, I think that, yeah, it's far easier to talk about investment, but to actually get it in, and because football relies on the emotional ties often with that sort of thing, it's fine to have a company come in and sponsor and to offer like new deals, but it can be very hard to get it moving to that next level.
The other thing is, sorry to jump in, but when people say investment, what they mean is, could someone just give us some money that we can then just spend and not have to give back? Like that's what we actually want, and that's very hard to come.
And to be fair, we have actually done that. We have, and with looking at the sort of deals that get agreed and celebrated. With relation to players coming in, you look back to last season and we brought in both Lewis Jamieson and Finlay Pollock. Finlay Pollock came in before the Accies game. Jamieson came in before we played Ayr in the Challenge Cup, I believe. And then we had Frankie Davo and Corey David come in at a later point after that. There can always be these sort of surprises or anomalies that crop up. But just with the way that the market is nowadays, I know that you guys have touched on it already, but it's the lay of the land, both with Brexit and the financial setting for clubs within the UK. If you look at the business that clubs down south are doing, like the traditional markets of where we would sign players, naturally clubs down south, firstly, they're coming up to Scotland and raiding youth academies. Even St Johnstone, good example when you see the lad that's gone off to Arsenal. And that's one of the, I don't know if it's a record or one of their higher fees that they've received. They played one first team game after the deal had been agreed at the end of last season. But even with the scouting that they're doing, there was a guy that I believe, so the English non-league obviously goes down to what was the Vanarama and then the Vanarama North and South, which was where Richard Chin was playing, and then it goes into the combined counties and the regional leagues and things like that. You're talking about like 7th and 8th tier. There are guys down there. So there was a boy called Jake Tabor, I believe his name was, who effectively was playing, I think it was someone like Amersham Town, and he was scoring goals for fun at that level. You're talking about like 129 in like 49, 59 games or something. He's been picked up by Swindon Town, and clubs, professional clubs, are taking punts on players like that now, just because he's got a line of contract offers and coming in for pre-season training. You don't know when that's going to end for teams in England, that the opportunity might come up, that they come up to Scotland. So it's very difficult to say that these players that may, because it can vary so much. I mean, we've brought in J. Rowe and Richard Chin. Richard Chin's one that I would actually bring in from the start for Saturday. I think that he's looked impressive in his sort of cameo spells that he's had. I'd be keen to see more of him because I think that he could make an impact. But then even with the players that are coming up, I know Deepo Akinyemi, he came up to Ayr from a league that was lower. I think he was in the combined counties himself, and then came up. It's a very hard market to gauge as to what the club are actually looking at. And I suspect if we could see the targets that the club were looking at, like a Football Manager style shortlist, you would probably be quite surprised as to who they're looking at and where they're trying to do the business and where the players actually end up, because there's so many bigger fish out there. And that's the frustrating part of where we're at when we're talking about, and again, Duncan, you mentioned it before, we're talking about a Sam Stanton replacement. I think that's a very hard thing to do, and that you do it across the pitch. Definitely. And to go back to the Moneyball, replacing the aggregate type of chat that I know that you probably despise. But yes, that'll bring us to a close because we've spoken for an hour and 40 minutes. Has anyone got anything else that they want to touch on before we look ahead into this League Cup ending this camp?
Actually, I've got loads, but no, I think we're better.
Spare it for another day.
better can it there,
Yes, take a beating for the listenership on this one. But yes, thank you for taking the time to listen. Please, again, don't unsubscribe. We hope that you remain with us going forward.
Just desperate to keep that above 500.
We're up to 508 now, so incremental gains. We're trending upwards ever so slightly. But yeah, once again, thank you for taking the time to listen. We will be back after the final League Cup game to chat about that, and then it's one of the big business of the league. Queen's Park started strongly with Josh Fowler. We'll need to have a look at that one. Aidan Connolly and Ewan Murray returning. But yeah, thanks again, and bye for now.